A lot of my work over these years has been helping people or organizations who are stuck and trying to help them get unstuck, either an executive coaching function where they're not quite sure why they're doing something or engaged in a certain way, or in an organization where there's just people who don't know how to kind of get beyond a certain emotional. And really being stuck is a big point. And I say that not because I have any expertise in being stuck, although I have to say I was stuck for many years. A lot of the work in getting unstuck isn't an intellectual exercise, although it does include the mind. It's really a hard exercise of learning to work with emotions. And as we learn to work with emotions, label them, define them, clarify the value, ask questions, we start to get familiar with what our buttons or our knee-jerk responses, and then how to be able to go through those. And why this is so important is because as we go into the uncertain futures, we go into uncertainty, as we deal with tension, we've got to know what our knee-jerk responses are, or these buttons that get pushed, or we'll just be reacting, and reacting creates an unsafe environment that doesn't produce life. The reason I talk about being stuck is because for many years I was stuck, and I know the feeling very well. On a personal note, when I was young, probably around 8 years old, I got used by an older girl who lived next door in a sexual relationship. And it created a deep deposit of shame in my life. And I just kind of shut down and just closed it off. Didn't want to be able to deal with it. I remember once in high school, I thought, okay, maybe it's time. I want to work through this. And I began to share it. These guys laughed at me. Thought it was funny that, I gained sexual experience by being used in a relationship. So I thought, well, it's not my response, because all I got is shame. So I just literally shut down. I thought, okay, I'm not gonna deal with it anymore. What I didn't know was this undercurrent of this kind of emotional pain deep within me created a view and biased me towards all my interactions with girls at that time were really confusing for me and distorted, because I didn't know, I didn't trust them, I didn't trust myself. I created this kind of emotional blockage where I was stuck, and for many years stuck. So I thought, okay, I'll play sports, and closed down internally. There comes a time when, when you love something more than yourself, and for me it was God. When I fell in love with God, I remember I was sitting with a learning group, and as I was sitting there, it was just a group of guys, young guys, and the staff was leading the time. Just a time of honest sharing, and I had this thought in the back of my mind. And the thought was, Matt, share with them your experience. My first response was, I rebuke you, Satan, and demonic host, in Jesus' name. Because I thought, surely this thing was demonic. A couple minutes later, I had that same thought. I thought, again, I rebuked it. What's covered by the blood doesn't need, I got all religious. A couple minutes later, same thought. I'm a little slow. Wasn't quite sure who was talking to me. Because the only tools I had to deal with were to hide. So I'm sitting there, and a sinking realization hits me. I need to talk about this. I need to put it to words. I need to name what's inside of me, specify the feelings. And man, was I terrified. For me, You may be different, but for me to talk about what's going on inside of me, to bring those fears to the surface, was terrifying. I knew they were going to laugh at me again. I knew I was some kind of I don't know, freak. And I was going to be cut off and alone. And that's what I feared. I was going to be alone. But as I said, falling in love with God, loving something more than myself, and getting the sense that it was Him that wanted me to talk about it. I took a risk. And I put to words what was going on inside of me and what had happened to me, and began to kind of get it out there. And lo and behold, they didn't laugh. To my shock, they listened. They understood to some degree or another. And that was really a turning point in my internal world when I realized that maybe my inner perception was different from reality. Maybe what I was afraid of, that shame or those fears, that sense that if you knew me, you would reject me. Maybe those were the things that were doing the greatest damage to me and not the reality of this greater love. Maybe, just maybe, because I'm talking from my heart now, not my head. I mean, my head can rationalize all this away or create the argument, but at a heart level, I knew I needed to either step up or step away. And I knew I needed to step into this greater love, because either God loved me or He didn't. And I'd made a decision that when I fell in love with God, I was going to follow Him with my whole heart. And following with my whole heart meant not being afraid of showing up, not being afraid of being present. And being present includes my brokenness, my pains, my fears, these things in me. And that was a journey. I've had different times of realizations of my own dysfunctions, my own limitations. I can remember one time, this was years after that, I just sat and wept. My little analytical mind kicked in and I put a timer on it. I think it turned out to be about 24 minutes where I just deep tears of weeping. Just because my heart had so closed itself off for so many years and had been unable to communicate through my emotions that it just needed to find a way to do that. And in my love for God, emotions are a part of my walk with Him. I'm neither or. My mind is vital to that process, but my learning to be vulnerable, and let me say wisely vulnerable, in appropriate situations, not with everybody by any stretch, but learning to take a risk, learning to try to be present, learning to be aware of when my brokenness starts to seep into my leadership capacity, or where it starts to twist and distort my relationships, or even in a leadership role, when I start to kind of twist and start to see people through my pain or through my fears. And until you can recognize those fears, you don't recognize what you're looking through. And those are vital because when we're dealing with tension, when we're dealing with uncertainty, when we're dealing with the unknown, those are the things that come to the surface and want to twist and distort our ability to walk into it. As we look at being present, the model that I've created, the work that we're doing, trying to create a space for it, we'd like to invite you to join with us. Read the devotions. I'd love for God to show up in your life. Because when He does, it's really cool. In this journey that we're on, we're trying to create a space for people to have honest, vulnerable conversations where they don't feel like people are going to fix them, where they can ask questions, where they can share their heart at an emotional level, listen, that they know they're listened to, that they can say what they think or feel, and then start to own those choices and own that process. I'm not a counselor. I'm not trying to be a counselor. There are very specific issues where you need very specific help, and certain people can walk you through that much better than me. But I'm just talking about general conditions of humanity in our broken states, and what does it take to be able to walk through that and deal with that. If you're interested, join us. Read a bit, ask questions, explore, push back. Be involved with us as we grow depth, as we grow capacity, as we get comfortable in our own skin and are not afraid of pain. I realized years later, a friend of mine, Landa Cope, really helped me to understand that pain is really the deepest form of intimacy that we can have. And I realized that in my sharing my pain with God and his sharing his pain through the cross with us is possibly the deepest, most profound intimacy that we can have. And it builds that sense of love and belonging and a relationship that nothing else can. Join us if you're interested. Be involved, ask questions, hang out. We look forward to engaging with you and being involved with you.